Hi, we're Nia and Mary-Anne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon.
Good morning, Nia.
Good morning, Mary-Anne, and how are you
Hi.
today?
I'm very well, and there is the most amazing sun in the sky
I know,
outside, which is fantastic.
I know. So I have not seen that for such a long time. I didn't know what it
No,
was.
and I'm visiting the city, which is really nice because I'm usually in the woods.
Country
So
Mouse visits City House.
yeah, I'm in the city. I'm quite excited to get out the door and have a look around.
Well, we better do this podcast quick then
Yeah,
so we
we
can get on with it.
better. But I'm really interested to talk about this, and
Mm-hmm.
what I've called this podcast is Let's Talk About Hunger.
Yay! Because, yes, I think this is fascinating.
Yeah,
Because I think our perceptions and our thoughts and feelings about hunger or how we approach it is
yeah,
very interesting. So what got you thinking about it this time?
yeah. I think hunger is a sort of thing you only think about when you put in the position of being hungry. I think we
Mm.
just we just live with our appetites and we don't really think about them.
Mm.
It's an absolute base element of life, isn't it? When you think about it, it's the sort of thing that protects you because hunger is how your body sorts out its energy needs.
Yeah.
Appetites are very much balanced by energy needs if they're not messed about by all the other complex things that get into hunger. So,
Mm.
obviously, there are extremes of hunger and there's some genetic and physiological abnormalities. We're not talking about that. We're talking about normal hunger in healthy individuals.
Yeah. So we wouldn't go and touch on anything sort of eating disorder wise or anything
No,
like that.
no.
But we're
Either
yeah,
way, yeah,
normal people who are normally hungry.
yeah,
So we have to be hungry. It's part of our biological
yes,
makeup.
yes,
If we didn't eat, we would fade away. So it's
yeah,
important to keep up your energy intake, to keep your body functioning in its optimal way, to feed your microbiome, my favorite
yes.
part of the body.
Yes, we know that bit now as well, but of
Yeah.
course we wouldn't have said that years ago. So hunger is vitally important to balance that energy intake and expenditure. So why does this all go wrong? And I suppose that's what makes you think a bit about hunger. But I
Mm.
remember as a child getting really hungry after swimming. I don't know if you
Mm.
ever remember that, but it must
Yes.
be that we used a huge amount of energy at swimming. And I used to get out the pool and literally be desperate.
It was really weird because I don't ever remember being hungry in the pool.
No, but when you
And
got
in the pool, I
out,
was just enjoying myself, having
yeah, yeah,
fun,
yeah.
swimming, rah, rah, rah. And then I get out the pool, I'll be in the changing room, and my stomach, I'm like, oh my
Yes.
goodness, I'm
So
starving.
it must have used a huge amount of energy, very weird. I just
Mm.
remember that as a child. I was thinking as a child, was I ever hungry?
Mm.
And and that's the one thing I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It gave me a little taste really, um, recently. So I lost my appetite with some peculiar virus.
Oh, you did, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
about 18 months ago. And I literally had to force myself to
To
eat.
eat.
And that was the
I have
first
never had
time
to
I
do that.
remember literally not having any appetite.
Yeah.
And it was really distressing in a way that I hadn't expected. I thought, golly, that's great. Imagine not having an appetite. You don't have to eat, and then
Mm.
you'll lose lots of weight. But it was awful.
Yeah.
And it actually took sort of 3 weeks to come back. And I really felt for people
Mm.
who didn't have an appetite. It must be incredibly distressing.
Yeah. I think that and loss of smell and loss of
Yes,
taste,
which
which
is
is all
connected.
related. And you just think that's really sad. Yeah, absolutely.
And I only realized when I was drinking tea that I literally couldn't taste anything, and
Mm.
I couldn't smell it either. So yeah, it's weird.
Mm.
Anyway, that was just recently.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question then. So how often do you think we are now this is
Yep,
actual hunger. So how
yep,
often do you think we are really hungry in the Western world, I'd
yes.
say?
So I think this is a really interesting question, and probably we're not. hungry enough
Mm.
because hunger is something I really thought about for the first time when I tried to change my eating habits all
Mm.
that time ago. And I thought I was quite scared of being hungry. And I
Yeah, I
thought,
think a
how
lot of people
weird
are.
is that?
Yeah.
Why was I scared of being hungry? So the fact is, I hadn't been hungry for years because
Mm.
every time I was slightly hungry, I grazed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it
I
did seem an odd thing to worry about.
I get this a lot. So a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I was really worried I would be hungry,"
Yeah.
and I think to myself, "What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you're
Yeah.
a little bit hungry?" But they really worry about what they'll do when they feel hungry. And I think there is different elements of hunger. There's
Mm,
hunger where you get to the point where you can't deal with it anymore, and you've got to eat something now, or you will go
mm,
through the cupboards like a mad
mm.
banshee.
Do
But
you think
yeah,
that's what we're scared of? That we
yeah,
get that hungry that we'll binge on things that we shouldn't?
and obviously restriction
Mm,
kind of predisposes
yes.
you to that.
Feeds into that.
Yeah. So but maybe we've just got not used to feeling hungry, or even
Yes.
just sitting with our hunger for even a small period of time and
Yes.
being, it's okay, I'm just hungry. I will at some point go and get something to eat.
Yeah.
And I wonder if hunger is the same for everyone, and if some
Yes.
people do have a raging hunger more
Yes.
than others. I don't know.
Yes, I think it's really interesting. And I do think you're right. It depends on your tolerance of hunger. And I wonder if, in our hugely abundant sort of world, particularly around snacking and
Mm,
grazing, that people have lost the normality of some hunger before
yeah.
a meal. And that's what happened to me. I was brought up in an era without snacks, by the way, essentially. And I
Mm,
think we did get hungry for meals, but of course, there was always a meal waiting. And I,
true.
I imagine it was more normal for us to get a bit hungry than it is now. Um,
Mm,
but as a grazing adult, I'll call myself, I was one of those people who, if I thought about restricting at breakfast, I was starving by lunchtime just thinking about the restriction. So there's
yeah.
something
Yeah.
about the psychology around
Mm,
restriction that starts to make you almost panicky about
mm.
the fact that you're going to get hungry, which is very weird to me because what is so hard about being a bit hungry?
Yeah, I
Really?
think, it's not a pain, it's not a physical pain. It doesn't prevent you from doing
No,
anything.
no, you don't have to take paracetamol for it, do you?
And your body's actually more than capable of using your fat stores in those situations
Exactly.
to make sure you don't run out of energy. So, yeah,
Yes.
interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I do think that it's interesting bit the scariness, and I know that
Mm,
you find clients who are scared of hunger.
yeah.
It is something people mention, and it's to do
Quite
with
common.
restricting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
With restriction. And interestingly, whether or not, depending on why they're doing a certain type of restriction,
yeah,
which very
yeah,
much depends on their health conditions in the first place. But they do realize a couple of weeks in
yeah,
that they can tolerate the hunger,
yes,
that it's okay. And then they say to me, actually, I'm not scared of being hungry
yeah,
anymore. And I'm like, that's really interesting
yeah,
because you wouldn't have
yeah.
said that to me 2 weeks ago.
So they get more confident about the
Managing the
tolerance.
hunger. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay.
And interestingly as well, I think this is probably where we've got to with drugs to treat weight loss and
Oh,
hunger,
yes.
because the drugs work by making you feel full, so
Yes.
reducing your hunger signals. So ironically, we're now
Yes.
telling people who are scared of being hungry that we can only do this in a biological way. You can't be
Yes.
mind over matter, which is not true because we both
Yes.
know you do not have to have a drug to manage your
No, so
hunger.
this is a really interesting bit about the GLP-1 drugs, which is what you're referring to.
Yeah, yeah.
That they, the thing that most people talk about if you talk about those drugs
Is the
is their loss of appetite or more manageable appetite.
mm,
And this
mm.
is the thing that works for them more than anything else. And it's obviously a complicated drug, and it's not only about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk
Interestingly, though,
about
it
that.
works in two ways to do
Yeah.
that. We'll talk about it on another
Yeah.
podcast, but it works in your brain and in your gut. So that's a
Yeah, there you
fascinating
go.
thing that
Yes.
it does involve that psychological element, just biologically
Yes.
tweaked.
Interesting. And also, of course, that there might be other applications for these drugs
Yes.
because
Yeah.
of the the brain bit.
The
So
dopamine part, yeah.
yeah, so
So,
in addictions, for instance, yeah.
yes, there's a lot actually, interestingly, totally off
Mm.
topic. Interestingly, there's a lot being talked about in terms of how can we use these for substance use disorders and
Yes,
things like that. So
exactly.
I'm fascinated to see how that pans out.
And
Anyway,
they talk about it affecting food noise, which is a really interesting way of
yeah.
putting it. That continual sort of, and it's hard to call it hunger because you can't be hungry all the time, but it's that trigger thing
Mm,
where you think you're hungry,
yeah.
or you have to carry food at all times in case you run out. Because what will you do? I mean,
Yes.
it's a bit like the water bottle story, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got to a place where we're all frightened not to snack.
Well, it's a bit weird, really, because you think about it, and there are so many convenience shops and
Yes,
24-hour
everywhere.
shops. We couldn't actually go hungry if we tried. So the fact we're taking stuff around with
Unless we're
us is a bit
very
bizarre,
poor. I mean, and we
unless
should
you're very
probably
poor.
say that.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
not
Oh,
talking
absolutely.
about this in the context of food poverty,
Yeah,
which
no,
is
absolutely.
a whole
Other
nother
other
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got, where have we got to? We people are feeling not very hungry
Because they snacking
because
every
they're
time they
snacking a
feel a
lot.
bit hungry. Yeah.
And then probably they're not feeling hungry for their meal either, are they? Because they're filled up on all
No.
the
Do you
snacks.
remember that? I
Yeah.
used to come home and ravenous from work and literally hit the cupboards while I made dinner with a
Mm,
glass of wine, by the way, and then really not be that keen to eat the dinner.
yeah.
It was so frustrating. And when I stopped doing a few of those things, I really began to enjoy my dinner and think, why haven't I done this before?
Mm,
Why haven't I really stopped myself from, I still do it occasionally, eat some cheese and biscuits while I'm thinking about making dinner and then think, why did I do that?
mm.
So it's that trigger of being a slightly
Slightly
peckish.
hungry. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Okie dokes. So obviously, generally, hunger normally positive because
Yes.
we need it. Otherwise, as I said at the beginning, we would
Yeah.
fade away. Okay, so we are talking about hunger being an inbuilt survival mechanism because, as I said, we need to
Yeah.
feed ourselves regularly, but not too regularly.
Yeah.
And people who don't get hungry have a real problem when
Yeah.
they don't feel hungry. So
Yeah.
generally, hunger should be a positive thing and not something to be scared
Exactly.
about.
Exactly. And I think one of the problems is that living in a world with huge amounts of food availability,
Mm,
we've normalized not being hungry or being very full all the time.
mm,
People who are changing their eating habits to address things like weight management and blood sugar control. First, it feels really, that you're going against the grain by allowing yourself to get hungry.
mm.
Once you, and what we're saying, I suppose, is once you normalize that, it does become a really positive thing rather than a negative thing. So when you start off, you think, golly, what am I going to do when I'm hungry?
Mm.
But I started to really enjoy being hungry. And I don't mean that in some sort of negative psychological way. I
No,
just
yeah,
mean I really had never been hungry for a very long time.
yeah. And you
And I
started to
enjoyed
look
the
forward.
sensation of
Yeah,
hunger with a nice meal waiting on the end of that.
yeah,
So this was a real positive thing for me. It just changed how I ate, really.
yeah. So actually, the positive thing is that cutting down on the bits in
Yeah.
between makes you feel really hungry for the good
Mm,
balanced meals that you should be having, which mainly is what people tell me when they say they eat well is I eat a really good
yeah.
they always tell me, which can be true and
Yes,
has shades of
depends.
fiction, I've got to be honest, but they always say I eat 3 good meals a day, it's what I
Yeah.
put on top that's the problem, and sometimes it's both. It's
Yes,
it's what they're eating and what they're putting on top, but it's interesting.
exactly. So
Yeah.
the other element to this hunger thing, which we should mention, which
Mm,
I also learned all those years ago, was that if I changed the quality of my food, that it
mm,
really helped me not to feel that triggering hunger that makes you want to go to, you know, the local coffee shop and get a muffin.
yeah.
And I was really grateful and very surprised by that because I knew the physiology. So the physiology around easy carbohydrates that give you a sugar peak, that give you the insulin peak, that then continue to roller
Mm,
coast you
yeah,
along the hunger sort of wave.
Yeah.
I knew about it, but it wasn't until I changed that my breakfast from cereal and toast and other things that I was so amazed that it actually worked. So I could get
Yeah.
to 11 a.m. or 12 and be content to wait till lunchtime. It had never happened to me before. So that was the second bit of the hunger thing. So
Yeah.
tolerating some degree of hunger and actually enjoying the prospect of a meal was one. But the second surprise was if I changed the quality of what I ate, I
Yeah.
got much less of the craving hunger that I think is the trigger for making you eat fast food.
I think it's really fascinating that and the diabetics that I work with, once we control their blood sugar in terms
Yes,
of keeping them stable,
yes,
steady, they often say to me that they firstly they don't feel hungry anymore, but also they don't fancy the food that they used
yes.
to fancy. So someone told me that they looked at what someone else was eating and they just thought they wanted to throw up because it looked
Yeah,
disgusting. And I
yeah.
thought, oh, that's really interesting. And they said 2 weeks ago I'd have chomped my own arm off to eat that.
That's really interesting. And I used to say to my diabetics, I'll know I've won a bit when you go to your local coffee shop and you look around at all those people eating chocolate gatto and you think,
You don't
they
want
just
one.
don't know. And I really don't feel like that chocolate gatto because I've
Yeah.
had a really good breakfast. So, yes, I think that's really fascinating. So, you're choosing then.
Yes.
You're choosing to eat in a
Better.
way.
Because you
It's
know how
not
it makes you
restriction
feel.
then.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So that's really good news, isn't it? Because ultimately it's saying if we change the quality of our
Yeah.
food, we will respond to other foods so much better. We will,
Yes.
we will have less cravings. And of course, there is the possibility that you can eat too much good quality food.
Oh god,
It is
yes, of course you
possible.
can. Yeah.
Mm, I think I think it comes with a certain it does take effort, I've got to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, of
And
course.
forcing yourself
An
past
awareness really.
an awareness, yeah.
Yeah. Like
Um,
all
but
these things.
but anyway, so the whole thing that really counts is if you take out the poor quality stuff
Yeah.
that makes you have the sugar spikes and the
It
insulin
makes you
spikes that
hungry. Mm.
leads to the cravings and long term causes fat storage around your abdomen and your visceral organs,
Yeah.
and then then you get chronically high insulin and insulin resistance and more hunger. And I think we've done something about that before, but we've
We
certainly talked
have.
about it. That,
Yeah.
ultimately you're not imagining it, you are more hungry because your body is making you more hungry. But there
Yeah.
is a way of sorting that out and actually addressing your hunger and then having a hunger that is serving you rather than you
Yes.
serving the hunger.
So you no longer need that thing called willpower, isn't that the thing that it's all
Yes, yeah,
connected to? So once I changed the quality of my food and became aware that hunger was actually a sensation that was rather positive, it
yeah.
changed everything because and when I look back, some of my overeating was entirely physiological. And
Mm,
that was a really lovely realization that it wasn't my character that was flawed because I think that's what happens to people when
mm,
they can't
mm.
keep to plans or they can't, tolerate a degree of restriction or whatever it is. They feel bad about it
Well,
because,
yeah, and we tell them that they're bad
yeah,
about it as well
yeah,
because they come to you and, they go to the slimming clubs and they say,
yeah,
well, you put on a pound this week. You've fallen off the plan. You've
yeah.
fallen off the plan. You
Oh,
have
that's
failed.
awful. Yeah,
You were unable to resist the cream cake, were you? And it's
yeah,
like, oh my goodness, no.
yeah. No, it's terrible. And actually, of course, they might not have had a cream cake at all. It's just
Of
how
course.
weight is.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. And
pretty
this is another
slow
thing about
about
measuring
coming down. Yeah.
measuring your weight and taking it as a whole in terms of like the fluctuations that can happen just in general. Anyway, that's another podcast. All this
So,
really, yeah.
yeah. What we're saying is embrace a bit of healthy hunger if you can.
Yes.
Enjoy your meals so much more, and it honestly is such a gift. It's not all your fault,
It's not all your
funnily
fault.
enough. There's a
No.
whole lot of physiology there, which we've talked about before.
And
And getting tuned to your body's energy needs is the next bit. So you start to realize that there's an enormous imbalance
mm,
and that's what's happened in our world, that we've got triggered into eating fast foods, ultra processed foods, foods that don't serve us well.
yes.
And then that there's an imbalance and this it all has to be retuned almost.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to quickly touch on whilst we are talking about that
Yeah.
is the concept of being hangry,
Oh, yes.
because I know I have personal experience with people who
Yes.
have hanger,
Yes.
and I made the connection, interestingly, that it was similar to a diabetic having a hypo.
Yes.
Because if you're insulin resistant and you're getting a lot more insulin released, and therefore you are
Yes.
lowering your blood sugar because you've got that pool of insulin at the
It's the
bottom,
same sort of feeling.
it's the same feeling as a diabetic gets when their sugars go
Yes,
too low.
interesting. Yeah.
Of course, we're trained as health professionals that if somebody comes in and it is irrationally angry and could
Yeah.
even be violent, if you think that they might be, if we would know certain
Yeah.
patients, but particularly if we think you might be diabetic, you
Having a
don't normally act
hypo.
like this.
Yeah.
It is one of
So you're
those
right. You
signs
don't have to be a diabetic
to
to
be
have a
hangry.
hypo because you're
Yeah,
basically going up and down that enormous roller
yeah.
coaster.
So your roller coaster, your
Yeah.
blood sugar is so volatile and can be
Yes.
spiking all over the place and
Yeah.
troughing as well, obviously in relation to the spike.
And we've actually measured it ourselves because
We had
we
a go, didn't
wore
we?
continuous glucose monitors, and I definitely got some reactive hypoglycemia, which was really interesting. And that was
Yes.
because of years of abuse of that sort of very fine tuning.
Yeah.
And you see it in your children, I'm sure,
Yeah, I
how
mean, young
finely
children in
tuned they are.
particular, because
Mm.
they use their energy so quickly. So
Yes.
toddlers, that's why toddlers have to snack, because
Yeah,
their
exactly.
tummies are small and because they use their energy so
Yeah.
quickly. And then stress as
Oh, that's
well
the other big
compounds the
thing.
problem. So
Yes.
cortisol also increases
Yes.
your appetite, because obviously if you're running away from a lion, you'd like some energy to do it, wouldn't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, except you haven't got the lion. You've just
No,
got 5 more patients to see, and you've only, you're at the end of the day,
and you're
or
tired.
whatever your stress
Yeah,
sources are.
yeah,
When I realized that's why I craved chocolate cake at 4 p.m., it was a real revelation for me too. Again, it wasn't a character flaw after all. It
no.
was a physiological process, and stress is probably the one thing we don't talk about enough. That's often at the bottom
Yeah.
of a lot of our unhealthy lifestyle choices.
I find it fascinating that I see so many people and we talk about stress, and a lot of them tell me that they have got very stressful lives, and then they tell me what's happened, and I think, yep, you have got a really stressful
Yeah.
life. And then some people who just say, oh, stress doesn't affect me at all. And yet then they say, but this has gone on and this has gone on. I'm like, are you sure? Are you just so numb
Or are
to
they
it
just
now?
better at responding to it? Who
Or are you
knows? I mean,
better at
that's a
responding? Yeah.
complexity in
Complex.
itself.
Yeah. But
Anyway,
yeah,
hunger.
I think ultimately, and this is where it's a bit tricky as well, because I think if we talk about blood sugar and balancing your blood
Yeah.
sugar and eating to balance your blood sugar, there's a lot of hokum out there as well, which is difficult to kind of cut through the noise.
Yeah.
But it's all about the quality food that is balanced, that doesn't give you those peaks and troughs.
Yeah.
It's never to say you can't ever have a bag of crisps again or a slice of cake again, by the way.
No. Have
That's
it
all
after
part,
your dinner, though.
yeah. But it's about eating
Mm.
overall in a way that
Mm.
manages your blood sugar, and you feel so much better for it. And then the
Yeah.
hunger that you do get is actual nice hunger,
Yes.
like when
Yes.
you
Nice hunger.
really look forward to going out for a
Yeah.
meal and you don't, and you get
You
there and you
haven't
read the menu, you
snacked.
think, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying this.
And
Yeah.
you don't have to do weight loss drugs to get it.
No, absolutely.
Isn't that
Absolutely.
a revelation?
Yeah.
And I mean, and we'll talk about that in a different podcast, but isn't that the problem about this family of drugs? Is that what do you do when you take it away? So does the noise come back?
I think that, well, actually,
And that's
yes,
the
it does.
question. Yeah, yeah. So can we make the noise go away in different ways? Well, we sort of know we can.
Yes. Yeah.
And not to say nobody should use those drugs because they are very sophisticated and in the right context can
In the
be
right
life
hands,
saving.
they're an
Yeah,
incredibly useful tool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Interesting concept, hunger. You don't often think about it. And lots of us are scared of it in our food abundant world, which
Mm.
is fascinating.
Cool. Okie dokie. Right, I'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye
Bye
for
bye.
now.